Tell us about World Environment Day 2025 and the theme for this year.
World Environment Day is one that has grown with UNEP. The World Environment Day over the years has been very much picking on topics which have grown and in substance and in depth. And the theme of this year is Beat Plastic Pollution. Why beat plastic pollution? You would say, hello, excuse me, plastics is amazing, is fantastic, it helps us so much. But then you look at the seas, you look at the forests, you look at cities around us, and you see plastics all around us.
Climate change, as we know, affects all of us. And evidence shows a severe decline in biodiversity and ecosystems. One of UNEP's roles is to raise awareness and promote action on environmental issues. What more needs to be done? And do you think the world is listening?
The world is definitely listening. The fact that we have all of these MEAs, multilateral environmental agreements on climate change, on biodiversity, means that the world has come together in order to bring this up. And that is exactly also what's happening on plastics. At the moment, we are working in World Environment Day on plastics because we need to have a plastics agreement. And in August, we're actually going to be negotiating again on the plastics agreement. It's really important that we come up with a resolution for this, because if not, we're going to have more and more of this environmental problem that we're talking about. We need to really scale up actions. The science is there, the policies are evolving through the multilateral environmental agreements, but then we need actions.
I understand you have some numbers you'd like to share with us.
Well, I was going to give you numbers on plastics, actually. So in 2025, the world is expected to consume 516 million tons of plastics. Okay? By 2060, this will go up to 1.2 billion tons in a business as usual situation. And you have plastic pollution everywhere. But what's really upsetting and worrying is that we have 11 million tons of plastic leaking into the marine ecosystems every year. Do you realize what happens then? It goes into the water, it goes into the fish, it breaks up into nanoplastics, it breaks up into microplastics, and then we ingest it. And so the problem is very, very serious. And they're interconnected problems because through plastics, you also have increased carbon emissions. Through plastics affecting biodiversity, you also have increased biodiversity loss. So all of these different problems are completely interconnected.
You know, later this year, we'll see the annual biodiversity conference. There's the annual COP conference. COP30 will be in Brazil and will really make Indigenous peoples become a part of all of this. What do you hope to see during these sessions? What do you hope comes out of it?
There's so many solutions in the world that we do not know about. There are so many practices that we have not sufficiently introduced in the way we are addressing the problems that we have today. So in the developing world, amongst Indigenous peoples and in various different communities, you have ways of living, ways of being, and ways of addressing a problem, which we can learn from. And therefore, COP30 involving Indigenous peoples is a fantastic opportunity to give them not just engagement in a kind of, they are engaged tick, but really getting them engaged to be able to help us define new solutions and address issues that we are not aware of and we have not engaged sufficiently. UNEP does a lot of this work, but you need it at a much more global level to get these potential solutions and ways of living. More than anything else, it's ways of living that we need to pick up from in order to bring in sustainability into our thinking.
And what about the balance between governments, especially in developing countries, and corporations, and the balance they need to find in protecting the environment, forests, but also making sure that they can develop in a sustainable way?
We need to have responsible citizenship. So we need to have a real good compact between the governments and the corporations and people. So whether you go into a mining area, or whether you go into a forest area, or whether you go into any kind of activity which involves those different stakeholder groups, you need a conversation that's going to take into account not just the interests of all these groups, but also the interests of the environment, which doesn't have a voice. And so to be able to really connect the dots and to be able to what shall I say, to come up with a solution that works for all, you need to have really good conversations. It cannot be just somebody going in and, pushing forward their idea without also understanding who it impacts, why it impacts, who is benefiting, who is losing from all of this.
So we know that UNEP is actively involved in promoting innovative financial mechanisms, green bonds, debt for climate nature swaps. And we know that Paris recently hosted this event, Europe's Finance Forum 2025. So how can these different instruments help the environment, this public-private partnership?
So UNEP has a finance initiative, as you mentioned, and this finance initiative is very much into changing mindsets, but also redirecting finance towards environmental solutions. And so the Europe Finance meeting that you mentioned is one of the many meetings that UNEP organizes in order to bring together the various constituencies that need to understand that finance is one of the key ways of motivating, linking action with the ability to actualize that action. And so in these green bonds, in the debt for nature swaps, and many of the others, you see an opportunity to bring in money, but also bring in a way of ensuring that that money can be used for purposes of environmental solutions.
Is there one message or something that you would just want the average person watching this to know or learn, something they maybe didn't know before?
What I would say is come together, work towards changing the way we produce and consume. The voice of ordinary people is incredibly important for improving the way we produce anything that we want and the way we consume. At the end of the day, the production is for the consumer, and the consumption can also determine the production, so they go together. So the more we can get, especially young people, to align, to come together, to change the way we look at consumption and align it with sustainability, the better we will be as the One Earth that we are talking about.
Assistant Secretary General Noronha, thank you for joining us.
Very welcome. Thank you for having me.